And then we have Hulk Hogan, the gift that keeps on giving. Hogan sat down this week for an interview with the Trinity Broadcasting Network to talk about his life, to talk about his faith, and to talk about how he almost became the next John Wayne. Yes, we nearly went from the Duke to the Hulk, but it was not meant to be. He talked about moving into Hollywood and acting from his wrestling career, moving into that aspect of things. And he had this to say. Well, it was a logical extension of where I should go with my career. Because once the wrestling took off and the character Hulk Hogan became as big as the wrestling business at the time, people were reaching out to me, to do other projects. Commercials, Super Bowl commercials, right guard commercials, all kinds of stuff. I don't know, that sounds like commercials to me. Not a lot of other stuff, it sounds like commercials. I like, by the way, how he classified them. There's commercials, there's Super Bowl commercials, and then there's right guard commercials. Like they're in a category of their own. I remember that commercial, by the way. He's painting on the beach. Anything less would be too civilized. Still have that in my mind. He said, and movies were a logical extension. So Vince McMahon and I sat down and basically spent 3 days over the beach. That's what it says, over the beach. Writing No Holds Barred. Oh, you could tell Vince had a hand in writing that movie with that Dookie joke. And then we brought a writer in to clean it up, and he pretty much got all the credit for it, because we didn't know anything about writing or the Screen Actors Guild or the Writers Guild. We didn't know anything. We hired a writer to clean it up. We didn't know he was going to own it, which didn't matter. But once I made that film and it was successful, New Line Cinema wanted me to make more films. And the problem I had with it was I loved wrestling so much. And I was in the prime of my career. It wasn't like I was on the downside and I was picking up extra work or trying to get out of the wrestling business to become an actor. I was the world's heavyweight champion. Hulkamania was running wild. I was in front of 20 to 30,000 people every night. Of course he was. Of course he was. I got news for you. By that point, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about late 80s, early 90s WWE. WWE was lucky to be getting half that in most places. Okay, they weren't getting 20 to 30,000 people in the buildings anymore. Not on a regular basis, they weren't. He said, now you want me to sit in a Winnebago on the side of the Sony soundstage for 14 hours, and you might call me at 5 o'clock to get in front of a camera for 5 minutes. The process killed me. I mean, there's an art form to that. And the really good actors, understand timing and exactly when to ramp up. And everything from the lighting to the camera placement to the cadence to everything. They understand it once they get in front of the camera. But for me, I was ready to jump off a cliff waiting for 10 to 12 hours for them to use me, or they may use me first thing in the morning, getting in the makeup trailer at 5:30 in the morning, and 8 o'clock I may do my first shot. And then, okay, well, hang on, we're not sure if we're going to need you for the rest of the day. So after lunch was over, no, you need to hang out. So I would sit there for 12 hours, and they would only use me for 4 or 5 minutes in the morning, so the process was hard. And so I always wanted to go back to wrestling, and I did. But I kept bouncing back and forth, making small little budget movies for kids and having fun with that, and shoot them 25 to 30 days and running right back to the wrestling business. I had the chance to become like the next John Wayne. There's a guy named Bob Evans that ran Paramount. I didn't know Brutal Bob ran Paramount. That's news to me. He took me in his office, and there was a big picture on the wall with Clint Eastwood and John Wayne and all the big stars, Dustin Hoffman and everybody that were contract players for Paramount at the time. And he said, you're going to be my next John Wayne. And then he kind of laid out the schedule and what was expected of me on and off camera. And I went, I am the wrong guy for that stuff. So I just decided to go back to wrestling. You know what I love about Hogan? Just how magnanimous this guy is. I mean, he talks about these things like, well, I knew it wasn't for me, and so I knew I had to let it go to somebody else, right? He tells almost the same exact kind of story about the wrestler. Because he claimed that the wrestler, which ended up going to Mickey Rourke, was made for him, or was offered to him. But then he said, well, I'm not a great actor for it. You should go to somebody else. He's willingly giving up all of these projects because he's so self-aware of the fact, I guess, that he's just not the right person. He's not good enough for the job. That's amazing. You know when someone tells one lie, you tend to be skeptical of everything else that comes out of that person's mouth? When someone tells 500 lies, I don't believe a fucking thing that they have to say. I don't believe him. But it's funny to think about Hogan as the next John Wayne. See, here's what I think. I think that Hogan is just upset that they replaced his scene in Gremlins 2 with John Wayne on the home video version, and he's just never been able to let it go. So he's trying to get some of that John Wayne rub. That's what I think. It's true, by the way. Remember when Gremlins, if you saw Gremlins 2, great movie. Gremlins and Gremlins 2, I watched them plenty of times when I was a kid. But if you think back to the scene in Gremlins 2, where they start screwing around with the projector in the middle of the movie, and they cut to Hogan, who's in the movie theater. He's sitting there in his gear, bandana and everything. He's got a big tub of popcorn in his lap. He's got the winged eagle belt around his waist. And then Usher comes over and says, "Oh, sir, we have Gremlins. And he stands up and he cuts a promo on the Gremlins, right? That's not on the VHS version. They took that part out, and for whatever reason, they replaced it with a John Wayne scene where John Wayne ends up shooting at the Gremlins. I don't know why. I was very confused the first time I saw that. I said, wait a minute, I don't remember that from the movie theater. You think those two would have been as popular in their respective fields if they went by their real names? Terry and Marion? Probably not.